This is 20 Minutes Live. Welcome to all of you from India and around the world. I am Ninad Karpe, partner at 100x.vc. With me today is Professor Rishi Krishnan. I am so delighted you have joined us this afternoon, Professor. We have guests from India and across the world. A brief introduction on Professor Rishi. He's a professor of strategy at the Indian Institute of Management, Bangalore. He held the Jamuna Raghavan Chair in Entrepreneurship from 2007 to 2010. He completed a 5-year term as Director of Indian Institute of Management, Indore, in December 2018. He'll be taking over as the next Director of IIM Bangalore from July 20th next month. Professor Rishi was educated in IIT Kanpur, Stanford, and IIM Ahmedabad. Wow, that's amazing, Rishi. His main areas of interest are strategy, innovation, and he's written 2 books on that. He co-founded one startup and was the CEO of another. He has been listed in the Thinkers 50 India list of most influential management thinkers from India. Amazing. Welcome to the show, Professor, and we are delighted you're here. Our format is simple, unique, and crisp. Professor Rishi will speak for 10 minutes on the topic. It's a very interesting topic. I am really looking forward to what he's going to say. And after that, we have a round of Q&A for 10 minutes. If you have any questions, please post it in the comments column on your screen, and I'll take it up after 10 minutes. Do not wait. Get going. Ask questions as soon as Professor Rishi starts talking. Over to you, Professor, for your 10 minutes.
Hey, Ninad, thanks a lot for inviting me onto this show. Let me just go straight into the topic. Is the battle between online and offline, has it just begun, already ended? Well, I actually think the battle has just begun. I have friends in the education training space who keep sending me messages saying, it's time to pack up, you guys are all dinosaurs, you better go and attend that course and figure out, how to teach online. But I think they're all a little misguided. I think it's all rather premature, because what I see is that while it's true that the online medium has become more and more powerful over time, there still seem to be challenges in teaching some of the things that we, for example, teach in a typical MBA program. So let's say we take a subject like statistics or accounting, where there are well-defined concepts. There's usually a yes or no answer or a right or wrong answer. I think these subjects can shift to online quite easily. There really isn't that much interaction required. You could probably sign up for a course on Coursera or one of the other MOOCs platforms, and you could learn the subject pretty quickly if you sign up for the course by the right professor. But in management education, at least things are quite different. If you talk about a strategy class, it's one thing to talk about the framework, but something very different to apply it successfully and effectively for a startup or a large company. So if you really want to understand strategy, if you want to learn strategy, you need a lot of classroom interaction. You need a lot of outside the classroom interaction. You need to ask lots of questions. It's not as though that cannot be done online, but you will realize that even the breakout room of Zoom or the other functionalities which online platforms provide for this kind of discussion are nowhere near the kind of experience you can have in a classroom setting. So I believe that for many of these subjects, like strategy, the classroom or an interactive format will continue to be the dominant format till we find a good way of doing this online. Let's also look at behavior related subjects. Let's take something like organizational behavior or human resource management, where the theories, of course, might be quite easily teachable online. So if I look at something like Maslow's hierarchy, I can very easily depict that and then explain it in an online platform. But motivating people in the workplace is much more than Maslow's hierarchy, as anybody who's ever managed people in the workplace would tell you for sure. So, managing in the workplace is a lot about experiential learning. It's more about subtle cues. It's about what sometimes people call situational leadership, which is about adapting your leadership style to the particular situation in which you find yourself. So, for all of these contexts, I can't see online education being very effective, at least the way it is right now. However, let me also say that online education, if done properly, certainly has potential. What do I mean by doing online education properly? You need to integrate, match concepts to your methods of teaching. You need to understand what can be taught or learned well online. And you need to use different pedagogies for different parts of a particular subject or topic you may be teaching. So let me take, for example, the same example I gave you earlier, which is that of teaching a strategy course. So for all those frameworks which I mentioned, maybe something like a MOOCs kind of a asynchronous kind of a mode is probably good. You can watch somebody explaining the framework to you a few times till you get it right. But then you probably want to combine that with a good video discussion where maybe some practitioners in the strategy space are discussing how that framework would be applied. And then you might want to have a synchronous online class where you discuss some of the challenges in applying or using that framework. Then you might want to also have some real time exercises, which might have to be done offline, ideally in a more collaborative mode, before people can completely learn what something like strategy is all about. So I have a strong hunch that unless we can blend all these different methods together in an effective way, we won't really have the effective online learning that we are looking for. So, this to me is the reason why I believe that the battle has just begun. Some of the technical challenges of online education have now been addressed. A platform like Zoom manages to do pretty effective video streaming without requiring huge quantities of bandwidth. So that's obviously a good starting point. But Zoom by itself, notwithstanding the breakout sessions and the polling and everything else, Zoom by itself doesn't necessarily address all the challenges of online education. So I think there's a long way to go in terms of making online education a comprehensive solution for people's learning needs. What is also required is more research on what is the way people learn online. Is it different from the way people would learn in a classroom? It looks to me as though not enough is really known and understood about this. We have kids today who are digital natives. Right from their young age, they have grown up in a digital environment. Many people believe that these digital natives learn in a slightly different way from people like you and me who didn't start as digital natives but started with books and pen and paper and then shifted to the digital medium later. So we need to understand how these digital natives learn before we can start using digital medium in the most appropriate way. And I'm really looking forward to seeing a lot more research in the education space on how people learn in a digital context so that we can adapt our online classes more appropriately to the learning methods that they use. So, Nina, that's my sense. So, I basically think that, yeah, I think the battle has just begun. And we're going to see many, many episodes of it before we can say the battle is over.
Okay, the battle has just begun, Rishi. That was good. We have tons of questions, so I would request you to be a little bit brief and to the point in the response, so that I would like to take as many questions as possible. The first question
Sure.
is from Anjali. She's asking, what about the students? Will they benefit from this battle or will they suffer? How do you look at it? And will they come stronger in the process? What about the kids?
I think the kids also have to be adaptable. One thing that surprises me a little bit is, in spite of the kids being digital natives, many of them seem to be having some reservations about moving classes online. Even our MBA students, who have, I'm sure, been using a lot of digital in the last decade, they seem to believe that the classroom experience is better. So I would just go back to the point I made at the end, which is to say we need to learn a little more about what's the best way for people to learn online.
So there's a question from Nishant, a very interesting question. I'm sure you've kind of tackled it. What about collaborative learning, social interaction, social skills, which come with a campus kind of environment? How will that happen?
Yeah, so that's a great question. In fact, that's a point I forgot. So I'm really
Yeah.
happy that I got reminded on that point. The social interaction part is critical. In fact, many people say that, for example, an MBA program is more a social experience than about learning frameworks and formulas and things like that. And most people have very, very close relationships with their buddies from their MBA program, even many years later. So I'm really concerned about that. I think we have to figure out, are there ways of replicating the social experience on campus online. So we're doing a few things in IMB. For example, we are trying to form virtual groups of people with common interests. We are doing some games online to get people better connected to each other. We are trying to organize some other online activities so that they bond better. But still, I have a suspicion all of this is still not a complete substitute for the offline experience.
So Rishi, you have been asked. There are a lot of professors on this chat, and all of them asking very straight, direct questions. Uh, there's Kavindra and Desiree, who are both teachers. They are asking, give us some guidance. What is the maximum number of students who can come online? Is synchronous model better? Asynchronous better? Can you give a couple of tips on making online education more meaningful and better from a student perspective?
So I think a few tips. One would be to do things in small chunks if you can. I think attention spans online tend to be short. So you're probably losing people if you do a lecture for an hour, you probably lose them after 10 minutes or so. So if you can break up what you're doing into smaller chunks, and at the end of each chunk have some form of interaction or testing, or some sort of break from the tedium, I think that's one thing that would really help. Asynchronous and synchronous, I think, ideally need to be combined, as I just explained a few minutes ago. Things which are very easy to understand, which are well documented, which, for which basically something you would find in a textbook. Probably good to do asynchronous, because then people can watch it multiple times easily if they want to understand something well. And you could probably shoot that in studio conditions so that it's higher quality. But the discussion part, and wherever there is more ambiguity, you probably want to do it in the synchronous mode. Maximum number of people, well, one thing to do is to go by the Zoom limitation. I think there's 49 people you can see on one screen. So that's probably one natural limitation. If you're using Microsoft Teams or some other platform, I think they have even smaller numbers. So one limitation will be certainly posed by the platform itself.
So there's a very interesting question from Nikki. She's asking, what about extracurricular activities? The concept of holistic education. How does that get impacted?
Yeah, so my focus is largely on college education. Obviously, the impact would be much higher at the school level, but in college, I think we can sort of substitute in other ways. I just mentioned, right? We are trying to create virtual clubs so that people can collaborate online. We are trying to organize a seminar series which the students themselves are taking the lead, which again is happening online. So there are some of the activities they would do physically on campus. We are trying to find online substitutes for those. So I think so. Some of the college level extracurricular activities maybe you can still do online, but at school level, I think it would be much more difficult.
So Rajiv is from Singapore and Anjani Agarwal from Bombay. I'll combine the questions. Rajiv is asking the blended learning model, will it impact big brands and well-known MBA schools? Because people may not want to do this blended. And Anjani Agarwal is asking, will it impact migration, of people, students wanting to go abroad for studies?
I think it's too early to say. What my sense is that big brands will be the last to be impacted, largely because of the power of the brand. Many times people say in an MBA program, the biggest long term benefit is the cohort with which you study and the social groups you form. So that is something which comes along with the brand in a way. So I don't expect big brand schools to be affected or impacted negatively immediately. It might happen slowly over time. Migration, yeah, a little bit, though I suspect even now people are still considering going abroad for their education. Don't, I think some people are looking at deferrals, of course. Maybe they
Sure.
don't want to go this year, right in the middle of the pandemic, but I haven't seen that, desire to move completely disappear yet.
So Sunil Khanna is from IIT BHU alumnus, old alumnus, still very active in IIT BHU. He's asking for STEM subjects require practical classes. How will that get handled?
Yeah, of course, that's a challenge. Though, it's interesting. Recently, I went to the training center of one of India's top motorcycle companies. That was just before the lockdown. And they now have ways of, for example, learning how to work in the paint shop with robotics and augmented reality and things like that. So it does look as though some skills at least can be picked up even through digital methods. I'm not necessarily advocating that, but it looks like some experiments at least can be done without being in a physical laboratory. Though I'm sure there are subjects where that will not be possible as well.
Great. Rishi will take last two, three questions. Kinner Sajdev, he's the founder of a edtech startup called Nourish. He's asking about barriers of access. Do you want to share your thoughts about online courses? And particularly, he's asking a very direct question: who don't have access to IIMs? Suppose online courses. Is that true? Not true? And how will the students have access to IIM online courses?
Yeah, so I think one of the big advantages of online, which we didn't talk about so far, is of course the potential access that it offers. In IMB itself, we've been running programs on the edX platform now for, I think, about 5 or 6 years. There are more than 50 courses we offer on edX, which are open to people all over the world. That those courses are of course asynchronous. There's a little bit of discussion forum and so on, but it's nowhere like the classroom experience in an MBA program. So those offerings will of course continue to exist, and I hope they will get stronger over time. If you're asking about what about people who are students in an IIM or IIT and live in places where internet access is not too good, yes, that is a challenge. We are trying to encourage some of our students who are in that kind of a situation to move temporarily to a place where internet access is better. We might even consider tying up with some of the companies who offer 4G to see if we can get a good package for some of these students. We are also looking at bundling some equipment, maybe a high-end laptop as part of financial aid if it is required. So there are many options we are looking at to make sure that students are not disadvantaged because of lack of access.
So, just a quick response again. Kinner is asking, he's clarifying, he's saying he meant that IIM professors publish the individual courses, not just as an institution. Is that possible or still not possible? Like they do outside India? Individual,
Uh,
courses.
Yeah, so I think maybe I didn't understand the question well, but that's what happens on edX, right? So the
Right,
edX
sure, sure.
platform, you can sign up for any course you want, and as I said, we have more than 50 courses running on edX. All of them also now run on the Government of India's Swayam platform. we have pretty good enrollments on SWAYAM. So we have people all across the country and in fact across the world on edX who have been accessing our courses. For example, I heard that our human resource management course had people from more than 100 countries enrolled. So I think there's pretty good enrollment in some of these, and these are all standalone, and they're just offered by one professor, shot in the studio, and then uploaded on
Sure.
edX.
So I'm going to wind this down with a final question, a very direct kind of controversial question. Prashant is asking: COVID is a temporary problem. Why should we build a big infrastructure?
Well, I don't know which infrastructure he is referring to. First of all, if it's temporary, the one problem is we don't know what is the duration of that temporary. We, of course, are all assuming that COVID will go away at some point, but most health experts tell us that that real some point is when a vaccine starts working, and that vaccine, as of now, is nowhere in sight. So it looks like some of the COVID challenges could well persist for, I don't know, 18 to 24 months. That's the worst case.
I'll just take one last follow-up question from Deepak. He's asking, and after that, I have got one or two questions. Deepak Khandela is saying, post-COVID, will online continue or will go back to pure physical? What's your prognosis? What do you think? You have to put your clairvoyance hat and let us talk to us.
I think it's difficult to give a single answer to that. You asked earlier about the top brands. I think the top brands will tend to go back to physical because that's where their value proposition lies. So I don't see them embracing too much online, particularly for the students who are coming to their core programs. They might use online to reach out to larger number of students outside. But I think there could be a bit of a shakeout a little lower down. I mean, for example, if you're going to a, say, tier 3 business school, where anyway they weren't teaching you anything, very great, maybe a lot of it was textbook based, maybe online will be a good substitute to that textbook. You might actually get better learning from that online course than somebody who's just reading out a textbook.
So, Rishi, I can't let you go without asking one or two personal questions. Number
Sure.
one, you're going to take over as director of a very reputed IIM in India on July 20th. Our best wishes for you.
Thank
But
you.
you're taking over at a very interesting time, probably the most interesting time in its history. And you'll have a new cohort of students, not just IIM Bangalore, but let's say this new batch of students entering MBA education in June, July, August, September. What is your advice to them? What do you think the challenges, of course, are different? What you want to give some advice because there are a lot of uncertainties in their mind. They're a little
Yeah.
anxious.
Well, first thing I would tell them to do is be optimistic. The reason for that is if you just look at what's happening around us in India, in a way, there's a plan to rebuild our whole industrial infrastructure. If you look at the focus on manufacturing, you look at Atmanirbhar Bharat, you look at all the other programs that are being talked about. If even 20-25% of those programs take off, there's going to be a huge demand for qualified managers who can work in industry. So I think you should be optimistic about the new opportunities that will come up. But at the same time, clearly, you need to be both agile and resilient. It's not very clear exactly which skills will be most important at what time. So that's where agility comes in, and you need to have patience for this COVID challenge to sort of run its course and for other things to open up. So you need to be resilient. So I think these are the three things you need to be. And I'm concerned to hear about a lot of mental health challenges that are being reported during this time. So I think people really have to work hard at avoiding getting into depression or any other kind of mental health issue at this point.
Sure. I mean, Rishi, you've touched on a very, very interesting topic as you wind down because not much attention is paid to that. But resilience, patience, agility you mentioned. I want to wind up with the last question. In the last 3 months, you must have got more time than usual because of lockdown. Will you recommend some books to our viewers, one or two books which you have read or wanting to read or which they should read?
Sure. So one book which I really enjoyed was the autobiography of Venki Ramakrishnan, who won the Nobel Prize in Chemistry some years ago. It's called Gene Machine, and actually, it's interesting you asked that question because that book is actually right here on my table. So
Oh,
this is
great.
the book. Yeah, so this is
Okay.
it's a fascinating account of an Indian scientist who started, like many of us, he started his studies in India, then went to the US, did his PhD. Really, and it tells you a lot about the challenging world of doing scientific discovery, how exciting
Yeah.
it can be, but also how challenging it can be, and what do you need to do to really succeed. So I found that to be a very motivating as well as invigorating book. The other book, another book which I like quite a bit, was a book called Competing on Analytics. It's by Tom Davenport. It's not a new book, actually. It was written a few years ago. But essentially, it talks about how you need to align analytics with the strategy of your company if you want analytics to really pay off. And it doesn't just stop by telling you that you need to do that, it tells you how to go about doing that. So, as a strategy professor, I found that to be quite an interesting book.
Thank you. On that note, I must thank Professor Rishi for joining us in this session. We're so delighted you took your time and shared your thoughts on a very interesting topic. You started by saying the battle has begun, and you ended also by saying the battle has begun. But hopefully, it's a new world which benefits everyone from professors, teachers, and students in the long run. Thank you, Professor, again for joining us today at 20 Minutes Live. And for all of you viewers, remember every Thursday, 20 Minutes Live. Thank you,
Thank
Professor
you,
Rishi.
Ninad. Thanks a lot. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.